lot of nuts!
Moshi Moshi hyenas, and welcome back to another episode of Pixel Purgatory, where memes get judged. And today we're going to be taking a look at something that might spike your cortisol level. In fact, the thing we're taking a look at is the meme known as cortisol level. This is the hormone that your body releases when it gets stressed. But in order to fully evaluate exactly why this has become a meme, let's quickly take a look at the basic who, what, when, where, and why before we can start getting into overanalyzing the underwhelming. Who is this meme? The way that cortisol is currently used in the current modern ecosystem of meme culture seemingly comes from a tweet from February of 2025, almost exactly a year earlier, in which one person states, "People act like I wasn't scouted by arguably the best modeling agency in the world at 20 and that I was somehow ugly before, lol. You're envious, dishonest, and bitter. You're trying to spike my cortisol and make me less beautiful, but I see through your ugly intent." To which one Twitter user would retweet, quoting, "You're trying to spike my cortisol and make me less beautiful has settled into my lexicon nicely." So this individual, according to knowyourmeme.com, seems to be the first person who associated cortisol, the stress hormone that is released by your adrenal glands when you are in a fight or flight situation, as being associated with something that will make you more ugly if your body continues to release it often. Therefore, correlating any stressful situation and reacting to such with a release of cortisol from your body as something that makes you more ugly as a human being, and taking offense to that. So seemingly a model a year ago tweeted something about how cortisol makes her more ugly and therefore won't be reacting to your rage bait with any sort of emotion because the heightened stress levels would make her less ugly. That covers the what, the when, and the where, given that this happened a year ago on Twitter by this person. But the who is a little bit more complicated. While this is seemingly the first instance of cortisol being associated with ugliness in this way, it has gone on to be associated with the looks maxing culture that has overtaken Gen Z and streaming culture in a number of ways. And so the who is actually a little bit more complicated than this. As of just about a month ago, cortisol level spikes have been associated with some streamers that have been associated with looks maxing, basically taking beautification methods to their extreme and creating an entire personality around it. In a number of ways, cortisol spikes have been related to IRL streamers that are out and about doing things in real life, typically attending parties or hanging out with their friends. I'm sure you're familiar with the trope. One such streamer on Kick by the name of Clavicular, I haven't heard this said out loud, so if I'm saying that incorrectly, my apologies, is known for having a physique and a jawline that is associated with looks maxing, this subculture on the internet that has to do with trying to have the perfect look, the perfect male physique, as it were. And this one streamer embodies that. One tweet that went very viral just about a month ago, February 6th, so a couple of weeks ago, was this one that tweeted, "Clavicular was mid-gesture gooning when a group of foids came and spiked his cortisol levels. Is ignoring the foids while munting and mogging moids more useful than SMV Chad fishing in the club?" A combination of the first popular use of the cortisol level memes while also using a bunch of terminology around looks maxing in an effort to try to confuse the reader resulted in this tweet going on to garner 25 million views. Wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't break down this tweet for those of you who don't want to Google 6 separate terms. Clavicular is the name of the streamer. Obviously, if you don't know that, it might just be another one of these jargon words that you don't recognize. Jester gooning is a variation of jester maxing, which basically just means having fun, being a bit of a jester. Maxing means focusing on that specifically. Adding the word gooning to the end of that kind of means nothing, but is still effectively the same idea of goofing around. When a group of foids, that is female androids in this way that it's used, it kind of just means women, which spiked his cortisol level, which you now understand, or if you don't, you will by the end of this video, is ignoring the foids, again, females, while munting and mogging moids. Moids is male androids in this sense. Munting and mogging. Munting, I'm having a hard time finding a definitive answer to, but mogging is showing off something that you have more than. I've done a video on this, but if you're mogging somebody in some way, it means you are showing off that you have more of something than that person. Cash mogging, frame mogging, showing off you have a better physique, showing off you have more money. You are mogging somebody and humiliating them by showing off how much less than they have of you. Is that more useful than SMV Chad fishing in the club? SMV is sexual market value, basically your attractiveness to the opposite sex, and Chad fishing is like cat fishing, but basically it's really just kind of adding suffixes to the end of words you know. So Chad fishing is like catfishing, but instead of trying to trick people into thinking you're pretty, you're trying to trick people into thinking you're a Chad. So Clavicular was in the middle of goofing around in the club when a group of women came up and caused him some stress. Is ignoring these women while continuing to mog other men in the club more useful than trying to show off how much of a sexual market value you have to these women? Is what this translates to roughly. So the cortisol level spike is a little bit more than just a increase in stress in one way or another. It is very much associated with a bunch of other brain rot terminology terms that have to do with looks maxing, this focus on trying to be the most physically attractive version of yourself that you can be, and is also closely tied in with live streaming culture, because with the random nature of being out and about without really knowing who you might bump into, there are a lot of instances where you might bump into somebody who wants to show off on camera and spike your cortisol level. So that does an okay job of covering the who, the what, the when, and the where. But to understand exactly why this has started to take roots in meme culture, we have to turn to the age-old hyena principle. Well, we will be breaking down this meme using my 100-point system to take a look at whether or not this thing actually has any value to the meme sphere, starting with H, the heartbeat. When we're talking about the heartbeat, we're talking about two subcategories here. We're talking about the construction of the meme itself. How does it look? What goes into it? Does it do a good job of doing that? As well as the efficacy. In the realm of what this meme is trying to accomplish, does it do a good job of doing its job? In the category of construction, this is an incredibly simple meme. The cortisol level spike is indicated by this graph here. Which is a very plainly labeled low to high indicator, with the needle currently pointing at high, although there will be variations where the needle points to low, sort of giving a before and after, or an indication of what a low cortisol level spike and a high cortisol level spike looks like, very much attributing to the rage bait meme, where there will be a monkey sort of staring off into nothing, not rage baited, as well as a screaming lion to indicate somebody who is actively being rage baited. And taking a look at this meme, it's a very simplistic implementation of this terminology. It's colorful, it's easily legible, it's labeled cortisol, so you're not going to mistake this for something else, but it does sort of lack any sort of anything. I mean, it's sort of nothingness. One could say that the fact that pretty much every one of these memes that we've been seeing have been captioned via the tweet using words like gesture gooning and foids and chad fishing and what have you. There's so much text that already preempts the implementation of the video you're about to watch that is allegedly supposed to spike your cortisol level, that it almost kind of feels like the inclusion of this cortisol level image over top of whatever video you're watching almost feels a teeny bit redundant in terms of visual quality and fidelity. I mean, it's chill, I guess. Here's an example of another streamer who is a looks maxer, somebody you can tell by the tank top and the fact that he's got this jawline. This is somebody who very much values his physical appearance. And this is a stressful situation in his live stream where somebody is taking off his hat to reveal the fact that he's wearing a wig, as indicated by this cortisol level spike in the bottom right corner. I'll play it for you now. So you can see in this situation that clearly this individual is experiencing a cortisol level spike. He is simply munting and mogging the moids while out and about when some jester decides that he wants to maximize on the situation by seeing the camera and the fact that this guy might be a streamer, by grabbing the wig and hat off of his face, revealing the fact that he is very much not so much a looks maxer as much as he is, I don't even know what the terminology is at this point, but a very stressful situation. The other situation where you might see this used is this one, where you have somebody who is maximizing in their cortisol levels being released versus somebody who has an absolute minimal amount of cortisol level being released in this anime rage bait meme. That's definitely going to get the video copywritten, but you see the indication, right? One person is mad, one person is not so mad. And as a result, does this meme portraying somebody as high cortisol versus low cortisol not feel a lot like the rage bait meme, with somebody who is being rage baited versus somebody who is completely null to the rage bait? You have somebody who's angry, you have somebody who's not. Is this not effectively just the rage bait meme? Going even further, does this not basically harp back to the crying soy jack versus the Chad? One person has a clear amount of emotion being shown on his face versus the other person who seems to be completely ignorant or nonchalant about whatever the situation is. One person has high cortisol levels, one person has low cortisol levels. And so when we're taking a look at the efficacy, the hit rate of this, it does do a good job at portraying the difference between low cortisol and high cortisol, in that it is basically a replacement or a new variation of the crying soy jack versus the Chad, the rage baiter versus the rage baitee. So when we're talking about the efficacy, how well does this meme do at doing its job? I do think there is a slight variation in the fact that you can overlay this cortisol meter in the corner of any rage baity stressful video and give it a little bit of extra context. It actually sort of makes it so that you can take an older video, something that might be dated in its way, and adding this cortisol meme over top of it almost breathes new life into it by showcasing, hey, look, there's this modern interpretation of this by adding this cortisol meter that shows that this thing still has legs in order to be a meme going forward. And in terms of original construction and like visual appreciation, I mean, this is very much just an image, right? That's all it needs to be. Doesn't have sound effects, doesn't really have any sort of variations or anything to it. It's sort of just a kind of lazy interpretation, much to the same of how you can take older memes that have legs. You can also take videos that are kind of nothing and are basically just rage bait clips from people's live streams and then act as if it's got any sort of legs in meme culture by being like, look at this cortisol spike. Isn't that the hip new thing people are saying? So I do think it loses some points for that. I would say overall, it's a teeny bit lazy as a result. And so I'm gonna say this thing gets like a middle of the road, maybe a little bit above middle of the road. I'm gonna go 17 points in the heart category. Moving on to the second major category, we have yield, which is kind of like how much memeage can you get out of this meme in a number of ways. The subcategories we're taking a look at here are originality, how unique of a meme is this, versatility, how many different ways can you use this meme, as well as impact, how much of a difference in the meme culture has this meme made, would it matter at all if this meme never existed? Now for originality, I unfortunately already yapped a little bit too much about this in the heart category because so much of this meme harps back to previous iterations of rage bait and even the depictions of the soy jack versus the Chad. In reality, when you take a look at the low cortisol versus high cortisol variations, this is very much the exact same meme as the rage baiter versus the rage baitee, the crying soy jack versus the Chad. It is effectively the same meme. Really, the only uniqueness this has is when cortisol levels are tied to the brain rot terminologies around looks maxing, like Chad fishing, gesture gooning, foids, moids, and what have you. And so as a result, it doesn't really have a ton of originality. It's very much just a new variation on rage bait and crying soy jack. So I wouldn't exactly call it wholly original. It is very much a new interpretation of that and does deviate in a way with the cortisol level spikes when you're not comparing low versus high and are just showcasing a stressful situation. Putting that overlay of the cortisol level meter in the corner of these live stream clips is something we haven't exactly seen before. In terms of versatility, it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint when we're using the cortisol level meme and when we are instead reverting to encompassing all of the brain rot terminology as the meme. So take a look at how many different variations of this. You know, we have a bunch of anime edits from the girls from, I'm just going to call it the horse racing gacha game, so you guys don't eat me alive for mispronouncing it. But there's a lot of memes that I've been seeing on Twitter that are basically a high cortisol and a low cortisol variation of the same character. For instance, so you can see there is this high cortisol, stressed out, high detailed version. And then the low cortisol is very much just gesture maxing, dancing around, having fun to do with this TikTok trend. And that's basically just happy versus sad, rage bait versus calm, that sort of thing. The other variations that I see of cortisol are in tweets that are, again, basically just using as much of the brain rot terminology as possible, of which cortisol levels are a part of. For instance, this one tweet, youth pastor sitting backwards on a chair. Let me tell you about a guy who caused the Romans to have a cortisol spike because he faith mogged them while holy maxing. This is obviously just trying to use as much of that brain rot terminology as possible, of which cortisol spikes have now become a part of. And so you've got the situation where you can use a bunch of internet terminology in an effort to try to either seem hip or just be confusing to the viewer, as well as different interpretations of cortisol levels being high and low in order to depict different characters, as well as just putting the cortisol level on high as an overlay to a stressful situation so that people can show off clips from their live stream. I would argue that's way more variations than I would ever expect out of this small PNG of a chemical that your body releases from the adrenal gland, and the fact that it's got a little bit of background coming from a model of all people talking about cortisol levels spiking and causing her to become more ugly. There are a number of different ways you could use this meme, some better, some worse, some heavily reliant on a lot of other memes to do the carrying, but it's certainly not one-dimensional. And then last but not least, in the yield category, we have the impact. How much of a difference has the cortisol spike level meme had in the meme culture? Has it changed anything? And I would argue that the cortisol level spike is the variation of the brain rot terminology that is really carrying the rest of it. Mogging, foids, looks maxing, all of these things have really started to grow in popularity because of the kick streamers whose streams have been going viral with these terminologies accompanying them. But the fact that the cortisol level spike is the one that sort of breached containment and resulted in these anime edits and people using it in more terminologies rather than just adding maxing to the end of things, has resulted in this becoming more of a meme than it would have been otherwise. And so as a result, we have Elder Scrolls edits, anime girl edits, people tweeting out using these old pieces of terminology that are now garnering more attention simply because they include the cortisol level spike. And the fact that some of these stream clips have gone on to get millions and millions of views purely because they've got that cortisol level spike encompassed in them, accompanying all the rest of the terminology. I would argue this is actually doing a half decent job at spreading around the memes. So in terms of impact, yeah, it's shockwavy for sure. So in terms of yield, the variations that this meme has are a teeny bit one-dimensional. Most of the different variations we've been seeing have been talented meme artists taking it upon themselves to capitalize on the fact that they see cortisol levels spiking, becoming more popular, and so making other variations using the cortisol level meter. It is also doing a good job at spreading around the meme. It's definitely got an impact on the meme culture, but will it continue to be something that becomes a staple within meme culture? Well, when we take a look at the originality, this thing is very much based on tried and true memes like the rage bait monkey, as well as the crying soy jack versus the Chad. It isn't wholly original in that regard, but I do think it does enough of a variation of that tried and true method that it is probably going to continue on, if for no reason other than to continue to be labeled and portrayed on top of rage baity clips. Plus, it's kind of just fun to say, you spiked my cortisol level, and the fact that it's got that intrinsic and it's making me uglier because you're stressing me out is definitely a little bit wholly unique compared to just simply calling something rage bait. Certainly loses some points as a result of that, but in a lot of its categories and yield, I think it does do a half decent job. I'm gonna give this a solid 20 points out of 25. Moving on to our third category, N, which is the nasty gal category, where we take a look at the negatives of using this as a meme and its existence as a whole. We have 3 subcategories here. The cringe factor, how upsetting is it to other people to see you share this meme? The coworker meme factor, which is basically how normified, how much brain rot, how much TikTok infiltration will this meme have, as well as the industry plant meme. How wholly natural does this meme seem to have come out of the meme sphere versus how much does it feel like somebody is trying to force this into meme culture? And I've got some bad news for you guys. This meme is going to lose some fucking points here. Take a look at the first category, which is the cringe factor. How cringe is it for you to be sharing this meme? Cortisol level on its own is sort of interesting. If you tell somebody that you're spiking my cortisol and it's resulting in you making me uglier, that's a little bit funny, and it might even be interesting to explain to somebody what cortisol is. Fuck, you might even be making people a teeny bit smarter by using that version of the meme. But when we take a look at the overall encompassing terminology that is around it, I have very frequently referred to this as brain rot. These are very much words that people are trying to elongate and make as stupid as possible in an effort to make you sillier and stupider for having read some of the sentences that they have put in front of you. So if you were to send somebody a meme that said, yo man, I'm trying to gesture max and you're over here soy mogging me and spiking my cortisol levels, they're gonna think you're a fucking lunatic. And as a result, yeah, this is a very cringe meme outside of some of the most precise use cases of it, because you have to use so much of the brain rot terminology around it. In terms of normie adaptation, the coworker factor, as it were, this is a very easy to use meme. Not only can you take the image of the cortisol meter and put it over anything and call it low cortisol or high cortisol, resulting in it being very easy for normies to adapt it, but it's also just like a word, right? Cortisol, what was originally a stress hormone, has now become a word that is associated with meme culture, and so it isn't impossible to imagine that your mom go, yo kid, you're raising my cortisol levels, go do your homework or something. It's very susceptible to that due to the simplistic nature of this meme. Both a good and a bad thing, but because it is so closely associated with brain rot, obviously it tends to lean more towards the cringe. And finally, taking a look at the industry plant effect, how well does this seem like a naturally occurring meme versus one that has been forced into the meme ecosystem? I mean, this meme is horrible. Right? In this category, this meme was very much popularized by kick streamers, people who are going around live streaming themselves looks maxing on a website where the best streamers known for entertaining content aren't exactly known for streaming on Kick. And 80% of the cortisol level memes that you see are not only associated with words like life maxing, looks maxing, mogging, and what have you, but they're associated with some of the lowest quality live streamers possible. In fact, the most popular iterations of the cortisol meme have been associated with the streamers like Clavicular and whomever else with the Kick tag and their streaming URL and all of their social media linked alongside them. This is very much something that has been designed in an effort to try to get as many people to share it, not because it's quality, but because it evokes an emotion out of you that's like, who are these losers? Why should I care? And 25 million people care about some of these things. This is very much something that was pushed into the meme culture. While it might have some of its own legs and have seen some of the anime edits that are wholly original, the main driving force behind this has been clippers in an effort to try to showcase and popularize some of these lesser known streamers by using this terminology. This is as industry plant as it gets. Last category, A, the aura, the X factor, the unspeakable, and any extras that we have tie into this final category, as well as my personal feelings on this. I'm a little bit conflicted because it feels like this meme is two sides of the same coin. It feels like this meme is being pushed into the populace of meme culture by people that are sharing these clips of these streamers that I could not give less of a shit about. As a result, a huge number of the use case of the cortisol level memes are just people using it as an excuse to post rage baity clips from individuals' live streams and then work in as much brain rot terminology as possible. Clavicular got into a heated altercation after two jester-maxed chuds tried spiking his cortisol while he was enjoying dinner with some Stacy's. Breaking, Trump brutally law-mogged by SCOTUS for tariff maxing, a decision sure to spike White House's cortisol. These are varying degrees of funny, but you can see how deeply these things quickly become just a use of memes in order to push a streamer to more popularity or a political agenda. You know what I mean? It really sort of taints the meme from having any sort of level of innocent gesture maxing as it might otherwise. But on the other hand, there are so many images from Bocchi the Rock and so many memes from the Umamasume girls that I feel like there is a natural enjoyment of the cortisol meme that is resulting in more memers making musical, TikTok-y, dancing anime girl edits completely independent of the streamer push. It really makes it a little bit tough for me to just be like, I hate this meme, because it certainly has a little bit of heart in there that is certainly coming from the popularization of the streamers pushing it that could only wholly exist because of the population embracing this meme as such, but like it's really got like a real deep dark underground as a result. It's a little bit tough to pinpoint if this is good or bad. I do like gesture maxing. I am a gesture maxer myself. I do like the incorporation of more people using words like mogged and looks maxing. I think it's one of those things that's like, if you use those words in real life or with people and they know what you're talking about, then you have this connection that's like, oh, you also spend time on the internet. You watch these streamers, you know these memes. And as a result, you have this sort of relationship with this person that you can have instantaneously. If you say you mogged somebody or I'm just gesture gooning, you know how I am, and they have any idea what you're talking about, then it's like, oh, you just made a new friend. And as a result, I find it very difficult to give this thing low marks because it's so encompassing of internet culture. But the fact that it had to come to this via kick streamers and just like degenerate IRL streamers, like if this was something that like cool YouTubers and streamers were using as a result, then I think I would feel more beneficial to it. I don't want to take off too many points. It definitely needs to lose some points in aura just based on its epicenter and what have you. But I'm not gonna be too crazy here. I'm gonna say 17 points. Little bit above average in terms of aura. Overall, the cortisol level meme, cortisol spikes as it were, gesture gooning, mog maxing, max mogging, chad fishing, and what have you. The overall encompassing of the cortisol level meme is very much a combination of a lot of different aspects of the internet. And as a result, it is something that I think has its roots in good memes. However, there are a lot of negatives and a lot of cringe factors that go alongside with using this level of brain rot terminology. And as a result, according to the absolutely flawless hyena principle, we have now come to the cortisol level spike receiving 62 points on Pixel Purgatory. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have thoughts? Do you have a meme that you would like to see on a future episode? If so, please let me know down in the comments and subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes coming from me. I thank you for watching for so long, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Spisu!